I need you to do me a favor and just clear your mind for a second. Picture a number. I want you to imagine $200 billion.
Okay.
200 billion. Stacked up, that is a number that reshapes economies.
I mean, that's the GDP of a small country.
Exactly, a thriving nation. And that exact figure is what the global customer experience industry spends like every single year, annually.
Staggering.
They spend this mountain of cash trying to figure out a seemingly simple question: are you and I actually happy with the services we buy?
Right.
They spend this on software suites, on massive consulting retainers, on sprawling outsourced call centers.
Yeah.
$200 billion. And yet, and this is the specific statistic from the dossier we are reviewing today that absolutely broke my brain this morning, actual consumer service quality across the board has plummeted to its lowest measurable level since 2016. I have been staring at the wall trying to make the math work. Logically, structurally, how is that even possible? You dump $200 billion into something called experience, and the actual physical experience gets demonstrably worse.
Because it's a systemic failure. Plain and simple. Welcome, everyone, to today's Innovation Unpacked Deep Dive. You're exactly right to be baffled by those numbers. You really should be baffled.
I mean, I definitely am.
Because what those numbers expose isn't a lack of effort. Right. Or a lack of caring on the part of these companies. It exposes a foundational structural rot in how modern enterprises operate.
Yeah.
What you were seeing with that $200 billion bonfire is the cost of measuring the completely wrong physical quantity at a massive global scale.
Yeah.
They are trying to measure heat with a tape measure,
Right.
and they are doing it with incredible efficiency.
Yes. That is the perfect way to frame it. The tape measure analogy.
Yeah.
And that is our entire mission for you today. We are unpacking a massive, truly paradigm-shifting manifesto.
It really is.
It's a strategic breakdown originally authored by Mike Boysen, which details the architecture of the venture-proof analysis. And for the rest of our time today, we're going to fundamentally deconstruct this venture-proof analysis.
We're going deep into the weeds on this one.
We're going to show you exactly why everything we know about measuring customer satisfaction is a multi-billion-dollar illusion. But more importantly, and this is where I get genuinely fired up, we are going to explore the elegant, incredibly raw behavioral truth of how to fix it.
Right.
We are talking about ripping up the floorboards of enterprise software and pouring a completely new foundation.
And I want to set the stakes for you right now, because we are going to tear into the exact granular mechanics of this failure.
Mm-hmm.
We aren't just going to sit here and talk about abstract business theory or, high-level philosophy.
Ooh, no fluffy stuff today.
We are going to look at agonizing, system-breaking bottlenecks. We are looking at data silos that are practically fortified, military-grade bunkers inside these companies.
Oh, the data silos are the worst part.
They are. The venture-proof analysis calculates that organizations are currently spending $2,007 on manual verification costs per execution, just to cobble together a loose guess about whether a customer actually achieved their goal.
$2,000.
Think about that. $2,007 of human labor, legal review, and data wrangling per guess. It is financially strangling modern enterprises from the inside out.
It makes my head spin. Seriously, when you multiply that by a customer base of 10,000 or 100,000 users, it's ruinous.
It is.
But to really understand how we backed ourselves into this $2,000 corner, we have to set the historical stage. We need to look at the last 2 decades of the CX field customer experience.
We have to look at the obsession.
Yes, the universal obsession. Because for 20 years, this entire industry has been universally hooked on what the manifesto calls attitudinal tracking.
Right. Tracking feelings. Tracking sentiment.
Exactly. Tracking fleeting feelings. The heavy hitters in this space, the acronyms that rule the boardroom, are NPS Net Promoter Score and CSAT Customer Satisfaction. We all know how this works, right?
Everyone has seen these.
Every time you buy a coffee or use a new piece of SaaS software or call your airline, what happens the second you hang up? You get an automated email. How likely are you to recommend our service to a friend or colleague on a scale of 0 to 10?
And the industry didn't just adopt this.
No, they became completely chemically addicted to it. It's the air they breathe. It dictates stock prices.
And this addiction is exactly where we hit the great Socratic separation of our era. It's the fundamental difference between knowing something and merely believing something.
Knowing versus believing.
Exactly. Because the data in this dossier highlights a terrifying cognitive disconnect happening right now in the C-suite. Consider this. 90% of executives operating today believe that their customer loyalty is growing.
90%.
90%. They sit in their boardrooms and they believe they're winning. But when you bypass the boardroom and ask the actual consumers, only 40% agree that the service is even adequate.
That is a 50-point delusion gap. That is half of your customer base living in a completely different reality than your executive team.
It's terrifying.
How do you even run a publicly traded company with a blind spot that massive? I mean, really, how?
You run it by trusting a broken dashboard.
Ah.
Executives believe their service is amazing because their monitors, which are entirely fueled by these attitudinal surveys, are glowing green. They are looking at an aggregate NPS score of 45. The board applauds, and they believe all is well.
But the reality on the ground is totally different.
Completely different. The consumers know the service is failing. They aren't looking at a dashboard. They are the ones in the trenches actually trying to use the product to achieve a specific stressful business goal and failing.
You know, it makes me wonder, are these B2B enterprise leaders just reasoning from analogy?
How do you mean?
Well, NPS wasn't built for complex software architectures. It was originally built for consumer goods. If I buy a pair of running shoes and the vendor sends me a survey with a smiley face to rate the checkout process, that kind of makes sense.
Sure, it's a simple transaction.
Right. It's a single contact transaction. I gave you money, you gave me shoes. I am happy or sad. But are these enterprise leaders really taking that exact same B2C smiley face logic and applying it to incredibly complex multi-stakeholder SaaS deals?
Yes, they absolutely are, and it is an architectural disaster. Let me break down the reality of a modern enterprise deal for you. You aren't selling running shoes. You are selling a $5 million supply chain integration.
Right, totally different beast.
You have an economic buyer who signs the check. You have a technical evaluator who ensures it won't crash their servers. And you have 500 end users across 3 continents who actually have to change their daily habits to use it. It takes 12 months just to deploy.
And then what?
And then the chief customer officer at the software vendor is trying to verify the success of this monumental undertaking by emailing a 0 to 10 survey to one project manager on a Tuesday afternoon.
It's wild when you put it like that.
It's absurd. It fundamentally misunderstands the physics of enterprise value.
Okay, I see the absurdity, but I have to play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
We can mock it, but there is an undeniable seductive elegance to the NPS formula. I mean, look at how it's calculated. It is literally just the percentage of promoters, people who score you a 9 or 10, minus the percentage of detractors, people who score you 0 to 6.
Yes, it's very simple.
It's incredibly clean math.
Right.
It fits on one single slide in a high-pressure board deck. You can track a single integer week over week. You don't need a PhD in data science to explain it to a shareholder. You have to admit, as a communication tool, it's incredibly elegant.
Look, I will concede that the math is clean, but elegance is absolutely fundamentally useless if the instrument is measuring the wrong physical quantity.
The wrong quantity.
Yes. It does not matter how beautifully designed the dial on the dashboard is if the sensor is disconnected from the engine. You cannot use a bathroom scale to weigh a freight truck, no matter how shiny the scale is.
Oh, bathroom scale for a freight truck. Wow.
Exactly. And you simply cannot use a momentary sentiment survey to verify if a multi-million-dollar SaaS deployment actually completed a highly specific, complex business workflow. It's a category error.
That actually perfectly clarifies the mechanical failure here. You are applying a tool meant for human emotion to a problem of industrial workflow completion.
Precisely. And the downstream consequences of this category error aren't just mildly annoying. They are catastrophic to the financial health of the company.
The cascading effects.
We need to really interrogate the limitations of what came before, because the venture-proof analysis exposes how this obsession with attitudinal metrics didn't just fail to capture reality. It actively corrupted the data. It created a perverse incentive structure. I'm sure you've studied Goodhart's law.
Right, Goodhart's law. That is the economic principle about targets, right? When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure.
That's the one.
Because people will game the target rather than do the actual work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In the early 2000s, corporations decided NPS was the holy grail of growth. So what was the immediate logical next step? They attached frontline employee compensation, support agent hourly wages, and massive executive bonuses directly to these survey scores.
Oh, no. So the incentive is no longer to actually help the customer.
Yep.
The incentive is entirely warped around surviving the survey.
Completely corrupted. Put yourself in the shoes of a Tier 1 support agent. What happens when your ability to pay your rent or feed your kids depends mathematically on getting a 9 or a 10 on a post-call survey?
You game the system.
You game it hard. You don't focus on solving the root technical issue because that takes time. You selectively trigger surveys only to customers you know are already in a good mood. You literally hear agents pleading on the phone saying, please, anything less than a 10 is considered a failure by my manager who would really help me out. The survey at that point is no longer measuring the customer's operational success.
No, of course not.
It is measuring the agent's ability to manipulate the social dynamics of the call to protect their paycheck.
That is so profoundly broken. You're measuring the theatrical performance of the survey delivery. You're measuring human empathy and guilt, not the underlying technical reality of the software product.
And the sample size makes it even worse. Because when we talk about these corrupted surveys, we are talking about a statistical black hole.
According to the rigorous data in the dossier, what is the actual average response rate for these enterprise surveys?
Oh, I read this. It's staggeringly low. It's single digits, hovering right around 7%.
7%. I want you to internalize that. You are a CEO making multi-million-dollar strategic resource allocation decisions based on a 7% response rate.
It's madness. And even that 7% is highly skewed to the emotional extremes. The only people who fill out a 15-question survey are people who are ecstatically happy or violently furious.
Right. There's no middle ground.
None. But the venture-proof analysis forces us to confront the real killer, the silent majority. The data shows 56% of dissatisfied customers simply leave.
56%.
They just churn. They rip out your software and move to a competitor without ever logging a complaint, without ever calling support, and certainly without ever filling out your 0 to 10 survey.
Because why on earth would they? I mean, they're busy professionals. If a piece of enterprise accounting software doesn't do what I hired it to do, I'm already behind on my quarterly reporting. I am stressed.
You don't have time for a survey.
Exactly. I don't want to spend 10 minutes giving the vendor free management consulting via a web form. I just want out. I cancel the subscription. The silence isn't satisfaction. The silence is abandonment.
Precisely. And this dynamic leads to the ultimate hair-pulling frustration for these business leaders. They are spending millions upon millions on these elaborate CX programs. They are buying expensive survey platforms. They are hiring boutique consultants. They are running endless customer empathy workshops.
And what do they get for it?
They hit what the dossier bluntly calls the 3% retention growth stall. Over a 3-year lifespan of a typical fully funded CX program, overall customer retention barely nudges 3%.
Yeah.
It completely flatlines.
3%. After millions of dollars and thousands of man hours. You know, I'm trying to visualize this whole tragic scenario.
How do you see it?
It is exactly like trying to navigate a massive multi-billion-dollar cargo ship across a treacherous ocean by, sending someone out to the deck to ask the crew how they feel about the wind.
Right.
While completely willfully ignoring the high-resolution GPS system sitting right in front of you on the console.
That is the exact analogy. But we have to ask, why do they ignore the GPS? They don't do it because they are stupid. They do it because of the data plumbing nightmare.
The plumbing?
Yeah.
Getting actual physical behavioral data, the GPS data, the telemetry of what the user is actually clicking on under the old corporate paradigm, is agonizing. It requires navigating a labyrinth of internal bureaucracy.
And the dossier has a crazy story about this.
It does? It details an incredibly specific, painful anecdote from their executive interviews that perfectly illustrates this. A chief customer officer suspected an account was churning. To get simple login decay data, literally just a database query to see if the users at that account were still logging into the system, that executive had to endure an 11-week internal security review.
11 weeks.
And authorize a $45,000 SOC2 compliance audit fee.
Wait, let's slow down and unpack the mechanics of that. $45,000.
Yeah.
And almost 3 months of waiting in committee meetings just to see if their own paying customers were typing their passwords into the login screen.
Yes.
How does a simple database query become a $45,000 compliance project? I just don't get it. Because of how enterprise data silos are fortified. The customer relationship management system, the CRM, is owned by sales. The support ticketing desk is owned by customer success.
Okay.
But the actual product telemetry, The database of who clicked what is locked down by engineering and the chief information security officer. They do not talk to each
They
other.
are totally separate kingdoms.
So when the customer success team asks engineering for product data, the CISO immediately throws up a firewall. They say, no, that database contains personally identifiable information, PII. We cannot just hand over raw logs to the customer success managers. It violates our data privacy agreements. We have to hire an external auditor to prove we are handling this data securely. Hence the 11-week delay and the $45,000 bill.
So the data is practically useless by the time you get it. By the time that 11-week audit clears, the customer has already churned and signed with a competitor.
Exactly. The compliance hurdles are so steep that CX teams simply give up. They literally cannot access the behavioral truth. So they fall back on the path of least resistance, sending another survey.
Because sending a survey is cheap and easy.
Because sending a survey through a third-party tool is cheap, it's already approved, and it doesn't trigger a CISO security review. But this internal gridlock is exactly why that manual verification cost is calculated at $2,007 per execution.
Right, it's the hidden cost.
It isn't just server costs. It's the human labor of interdepartmental begging, manually exporting CSV files, stitching them together in Excel, running it through legal compliance, and trying to reconcile conflicting data sets. Compare that agonizing $2,007 to what the dossier calls the physics floor of $2.50.
Okay, this is the pivot. This $2,000 versus $2 disparity, this is the absolute aha moment of the entire venture-proof analysis.
It's the core realization.
Because the manifesto realizes that if surveys are the weather-fickle, momentary, easily manipulated by a good mood, then behavioral evidence is the climate. It is the undeniable aggregate reality. And the core thesis here relies on a concept called the job to be done framework.
JTBD. This is where we fundamentally redefine what we're measuring.
Yes, the JTBD framework is incredibly grounding. It strips away all the corporate jargon. The premise is this: a customer does not buy a product to have a good experience.
Never.
That is a myth invented by marketing departments. I do not buy enterprise accounting software to be delighted. I don't want to be surprised. I hire that software product to complete a specific, functional, often stressful goal.
Like closing the books.
Exactly. I hire it to close my corporate books by the 5th of the month so I don't get fired by the board.
Yeah.
If the software allows me to close the books on the 5th, the job is done. I am loyal. If the software crashes and the books don't close, the job failed.
Regardless of the customer service.
Right. The job failed regardless of how incredibly friendly and empathetic my customer success manager was on the phone.
So the entire metric of success shifts. It moves away from the attitudinal question of how did this interaction make you feel, and shifts to the binary behavioral question of did the customer actually make measurable progress toward their functional goal?
And once an organization realizes this, once they realize the survey paradigm is fundamentally incapable of answering that binary question, the manifesto outlines 3 distinct growth pathways that companies typically attempt. Let's walk through them because the first 2 are massive traps.
Let's do it.
Let's look at pathway A, the lateral move. This is where vendors look at the failing CX department, take the exact same broken survey tools, put a new coat of paint on them, and try to sell them to new executives. Hey, Chief Marketing Officer. Hey, Chief Revenue Officer. CX is failing, but if you buy our new AI-powered survey dashboard, you can own the customer journey.
It is completely cynical.
It is.
It's just spreading the disease to a new host. It's taking the same fundamentally flawed, easily gameable attitudinal tracking and inflicting it on a different department's budget. The CRO might get a shiny new dashboard, but it does absolutely nothing to solve the root problem verifying if the customer achieved their actual physical goal. It's a lateral move that burns cash.
Which leads companies to try pathway B, the efficiency dividend. And I have to admit, when I first read this part of the dossier, pathway B sounded completely logical.
It's a very seductive trap.
The pitch is, okay, manual verification costs $2,007 because human beings are reading the surveys and manually checking the logs. Let's just use machine learning and automation to make sending, collecting, and analyzing these surveys vastly cheaper. But you aggressively highlighted this section in our prep notes. You called it a massive, potentially fatal trap. You specifically pointed to the Jevons paradox. Explain the mechanics of that for us because it blew my mind.
I'd love to, because the Jevons paradox is arguably the most insidious, counterintuitive trap in all of enterprise technology. It originated in the 1800s with coal consumption.
Coal consumption, right.
William Jevons observed that when the steam engine became more efficient at using coal, it didn't reduce overall coal consumption. Because the engines were more efficient, they became vastly more profitable to run, so factories built hundreds more of them.
Oh, so the efficiency backfired.
The efficiency made the resource cheaper, which caused overall consumption to absolutely explode. The Jevons paradox states that when you make a resource more efficient to use, demand scales faster than the efficiency gains, and you end up consuming more of the resource.
Okay, so how does a 19th century coal theory apply to modern SaaS data pipelines?
Because the dossier rigorously calculated the elasticity coefficient for this specific corporate behavior, they calculated it at 1.06.
Break the math down on that. What does an elasticity coefficient of 1.06 actually dictate in a corporate environment?
It means the demand for data is highly elastic. It means that if you use an AI tool to make your broken $2,000 manual verification process 20% cheaper, you don't actually save that 20% in your budget.
You just spend it elsewhere.
Worse, the organization looks at the cheaper cost and says, great, we can afford to verify way more things. So instead of verifying just the top 100 enterprise accounts, they decide to run the automated survey process on all 10,000 accounts. Demand expands, volume explodes.
Wow.
And because the underlying process is still flawed, you rapidly hit a brand new, even more expensive human bottleneck. The AI generates 10,000 alerts instead of 100. Now the legal team has to review 10 times as many privacy disclosures. The executive team has to sit in twice as many meetings to discuss the massive influx of dashboard data.
You haven't solved the problem at all.
No, you are just doing the wrong thing at a significantly higher, more chaotic velocity. Pathway B might buy a desperate executive a year of runway, but it is a mathematical rebound trap.
You just engineered a more efficient way to crash the car. Which brings us, finally, to the promised land, the true breakthrough of the analysis. Pathway C, the inversion leap.
Inversion leap.
This is where the entire paradigm cracks wide open and we finally drop that $2,000 cost down to the $2.50 physics floor. The thesis of Pathway C is brilliant in its simplicity. Stop asking the customer. Stop sending the survey entirely. Instead, observe their telemetry.
Just look at the data exhaust.
Right. If the customer's contracted goal was to consolidate 3 legacy billing systems into your platform, how do you prove they succeeded? You don't send a smiley face email. You look at the digital exhaust of their daily work. Did the CFO actually log in and approve a payroll run?
Did the CIO route the API keys?
Did the 200 end users actually complete the data migration workflows? You rely exclusively on ungameable, cryptographic behavioral truth.
Okay, let's pause. I need to push back on this because from an IT and compliance perspective, this sounds like a minefield.
A minefield.
You are essentially saying we bypass the conversation and just monitor their keystrokes.
Yeah.
From a CISO's perspective, this sounds like invasive surveillance. It sounds like you are installing spyware on the client's instance to see what they're doing. How do you bypass the privacy nightmare of lurking in the background of a client's workflow?
I get why it sounds like that, but you have to look at how the dossier defines digital exhaust. It is the exact opposite of spyware. Spyware collects everything indiscriminately. Pathway C is about surgical, predefined outcome verification.
Surgical verification.
You are only looking at the specific API calls and database state changes that the customer explicitly contracted you to deliver. You aren't reading your emails. You are verifying that the Boolean state of account setup flipped from false to true.
So it's binary.
Completely binary. You are using the natural data exhaust they generate simply by utilizing the tool they paid you for. And you use that binary proof to show both your board and the customer's board that the software achieved the ROI. It's cryptographic proof of value. Frankly, it honors the customer's time by not pestering them with surveys for questions your database already knows the answer to.
I understand the philosophical argument that it honors their time, but we have to deal with the physical reality of enterprise software. Mechanically, structurally, how on earth do you actually build this system?
Well, the dossier maps it out.
Because 10 minutes ago, we established that pulling a simple login metric triggered an 11-week security review and cost $45 grand. If you try to build an entire behavioral telemetry engine that constantly queries the customer's systems, how do you not trigger a rolling avalanche of compliance audits that bankrupts the vendor?
That is exactly what the venture-proof analysis solves. It maps out a specific, highly engineered architecture called the 3-layer moat, and it is a masterclass in systems design. Let's break down the mechanics. Layer 1 is the compliance-cleared telemetry substrate.
Right, and this is where we have to discuss capital expenditure versus operational expenditure, CapEx versus OpEx.
Lay it out for us.
In the legacy model, Every single time a customer success manager wants to pull behavioral data to see if an account is healthy, it triggers a bespoke security review. It is an operational expenditure. It is a variable cost that scales horribly with every new request.
Because every request is a new battle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What Layer 1 proposes is entirely different. You pre-clear the compliance substrate at the architectural level. The vendor pays for a massive, comprehensive SOC2 Type 2 audit up front. They negotiate universal data handling agreements with their legal team once. They amortize that massive capital expenditure across the entire portfolio of tens of thousands of customers.
Yes. You build a secure highway once instead of hacking through the jungle every time you want to visit a customer. That amortization is precisely how you collapse the cost from $2,000 per manual execution down to the $2.50 physics floor.
The math checks out.
You move the heavy compliance lifting to the platform layer, making verification a shared, invisible utility. But solving the compliance cost is only half the battle. If you've pre-cleared the telemetry, you still have to physically retrieve it without breaking the customer systems.
Yeah.
And that brings us to Layer 2, the federated data network.
This layer is a crucial spatial concept, and it solves the data silo problem we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
In the old broken data model, a vendor tries to build a massive central data lake. They try to suck all of the customer's raw data from their billing system, their CRM, their support desk into one giant centralized server.
Which is a nightmare.
It is a maintenance nightmare. The API schemas constantly break, and frankly, chief information security officers despise it because it requires massive data exfiltration. The federated data network flips the geography. It leaves the raw data exactly where it naturally lives. It doesn't move the data to the engine. It routes the question to the data.
I was trying to think of an analogy for this last night. In the old model, if I wanted to verify a fact, I would demand that the customer box up their entire physical filing cabinet, put it on a truck, and mail it to my office so I could dig through it. Highly insecure, incredibly slow.
Right. Mailing the cabinet.
The federated data network is like sending a highly cleared inspector to the customer's office. The inspector walks in, looks at one specific piece of paper, verifies the signature, and walks out with nothing but a, yes, it is signed. No data leaves the room.
That is exactly how the querying works mechanically.
The
Federated engine pings the customer's CRM and asks a Boolean question. Did the economic buyer log in this month? True or false? The CRM returns a timestamp and a true.
It's that simple.
That zero-trust query bypasses the internal data hoarding because no personally identifiable information ever changes hands. It completely neutralizes the CISO's objections.
Which allows Layer 3 to actually do its job, the goal-to-telemetry routing engine. Because the manifesto recognizes that not all customer goals are created equal. The engine uses an intelligent agent to auto-tier the verification requirements based on the complexity of the customer's contract.
Let's make that concrete for the listener. If the customer's goal is incredibly simple and low stakes, say, a single user needs to reset their password, the routing engine requires a very lightweight behavioral signal. One ping to the product log to confirm the password reset workflow is completed. Done. Verified.
But if the goal is complex,
But if the goal is a complex, multi-million-dollar B2B deployment, a global rollout, the engine demands parallel verification chains.
unpack parallel verification chains. What does that actually look like in practice?
It means the engine refuses to rely on a single point of failure. It doesn't just look at the system administrator's log. It simultaneously queries the billing system to verify the economic buyer approved the invoice milestone.
Triangulation.
Exactly. It queries the integration logs to verify the technical evaluators successfully connected the APIs. And it queries the product telemetry to verify that the end users actually hit their daily adoption metrics. It triangulates the truth across 3 different departments. It demands holistic, undeniable proof that the complex goal was achieved.
It scales the rigor of the evidence to perfectly match the complexity of the goal. It's a breathtaking piece of engineering. But, and this is a massive but that you highlighted in our pre-show notes, we have to talk about the governance of all this.
The governance is everything.
Because you can build the most beautiful federated tech stack in the history of Silicon Valley. But if the corporate politics are toxic, if the incentives remain broken, this entire architecture will die on the vine.
Absolutely it will. The technology is entirely useless without ruthless corporate governance. Because remember the Goodhart's Law discussion from earlier.
Right, gaming the system.
We are talking about walking into a boardroom and physically taking away the green NPS dashboards that executives have used for a decade to justify their annual bonuses. People will fight tooth and nail to protect those metrics.
They will defend them to the death.
The venture-proof analysis is extremely explicit about the political solution to this. You must establish a CMO-CCO charter. The chief customer officer and the chief marketing officer have to physically sign a co-sponsorship charter.
Why focus the political battle on those two specific roles, though?
Because they control the money and the narrative. The CMO usually owns the brand perception, the NPS dashboard, and crucially, the multi-million-dollar budget for all these third-party survey tools.
And the CCO.
The CCO owns the actual operational customer relationship and the retention metrics. The charter is a formal, binding agreement to forcefully rip the budget away from the vanity survey platforms and reallocate every dollar to the behavioral evidence engine.
Wow. Just pulling the plug.
In this charter, the CMO officially agrees to decommission the NPS dashboard, to turn it off completely. And the CCO agrees to be held accountable solely by the delivery of behavioral proof of goal attainment. If you do not have this charter signed at the absolute highest level, the middle management political friction will strangle the project.
Because the frontline teams will panic.
The frontline teams will encounter one technical hurdle and immediately revert to sending surveys, simply because it is what they are comfortable with.
You have to burn the boats. You have to completely remove the temptation and the financial ability to slide back into the survey illusion. So assuming a company actually achieves this, assuming they sign the charter, build the federated network, and route the telemetry, what does this actually look like when it collides with the real world? Let's talk about the results. What happens when you flip the switch on this machine?
Well, the manifesto is very prescriptive about the deployment strategy. You do not boil the ocean. You do not try to roll this out to your entire global portfolio of 50,000 accounts on day one. That is how IT projects fail.
So how do you start?
You use an MVP, a minimum viable prototype. You select one highly strategic wedge account.
Paint a picture of a wedge account for us. What does that scenario look like?
The dossier suggests targeting a massive enterprise in healthcare or logistics. Let's imagine a hospital network. They're paying you a $400,000 annual licensing fee for a new patient triage platform. If you look at their traditional dashboard, their NPS score is a solid 8. The account looks completely healthy.
But it's an illusion.
Right. In reality, they are suffering from silent decay. Nobody is actually using the new workflows. They're just too busy to complain. You take this one hospital account. You connect the federated engine to just 2 data sources. Nothing crazy, just the product telemetry and the billing system. And you let the engine run in the background for 6 weeks.
You run it silently, just observing.
Exactly. You run a shadow dashboard alongside their traditional survey dashboard. And after 6 weeks, you bring the executive team into a room and you show them the delta. You show them that while their expensive survey says the hospital account is healthy and ready for renewal, the raw behavioral telemetry explicitly proves that the lead system administrator stopped logging in 87 days ago and 0 patient records have been processed in a month.
You prove the silent decay before the contract is even up for renewal. You catch the disease while it's still curable instead of doing an autopsy after they churn. And when you scale this MVP up, when you apply this $2 verification across an entire global enterprise footprint,
The results are massive.
the macro financial unlock is nothing short of explosive. This isn't just beating the state-of-the-art by a few percentage points. It completely obliterates the old financial models. We are looking at over $400 million in verifiable strategic value.
Let's take the time to break those specific numbers down, because 400 million sounds like a fabricated marketing number. But these are audited, mathematically sound outputs of the model based on collapsing the verification cost.
Okay, let's go through the buckets. First, bucket $43.3 million in direct OpEx reclaimed globally. That is strictly the raw operational savings of dropping the manual verification cost from $2,007 down to $2.50, multiplied across tens of thousands of customer executions.
Right. That is the hardline item that makes the chief financial officer sit up in their chair. That is pure cash, freed up from eliminating manual labor, ending expensive consultant retainers, and bypassing those $45,000 SOC2 audits.
The second bucket is the truly staggering $325.1 million in preserved relationship value.
This is the critical mass of the framework. This $325 million is what happens when you successfully catch that 30% silent abandonment rate. Think back to our hospital example.
Right, if you catch it early.
If that account churns at the end of the year, You don't just lose the $400,000 renewal, you lose the expansion revenue. You lose the referenceable case study. You take a hit to your market share. The behavioral engine flags the friction on day 45 instead of day 360. It allows your customer success team to intervene proactively. It is the cascading financial impact of plugging the massive hole in the bottom of the revenue bucket.
And the third bucket is pure offense, $32.5 million in net new value pricing fee capture. When you reach a point where you can cryptographically, undeniably prove to a customer's board of directors that they achieved their functional goal, you are no longer a commodity software vendor. You are a guaranteed business partner.
You can charge a premium.
Exactly. You can tie your software fees directly to their verified operational success.
You add all three of those up direct savings, preserved revenue, and premium pricing. The total is $400.9 million in enterprise value creation. But, and I will play the skeptic one last time because I have to emphasize this for our listeners, I am heavily scrutinizing that 803x efficiency multiplier.
Okay, hit me.
Going from $2,000 to $2 is a miraculous, almost unbelievable collapse in cost. But that math only holds true. The savings are only realized in the real world if the company rigorously enforces what the dossier titles the outcome verification liability architecture.
The liability architecture, meaning what exactly in day-to-day operations?
Meaning you have to legally, contractually, and structurally prevent the organization from ever sliding back into its old survey habits. Let's say you build this beautiful, highly efficient behavioral engine, but the board of directors, out of sheer habit, still demands an NPS slide in the quarterly earnings deck. What happens?
The teams panic.
Your middle management teams will panic. They will quietly continue to spend thousands of hours and millions of dollars buying survey tools and managing sentiment scores just to appease the board. You will be paying for two entirely parallel systems. You will have doubled your costs instead of collapsing them.
So you have to kill the old system completely.
You have to surgically excise the attitudinal metrics from the corporate compensation plans, from the marketing literature, and from the board reporting. If you do not legally enforce the liability of using the new system, the 803x multiplier is a fiction.
It is a complete, uncompromising paradigm shift. You cannot keep one foot on the dock and one foot on the boat. You either trust the behavioral telemetry or you drown in the surveys, which really brings us to the ultimate legacy of this framework. This venture-proof analysis isn't just a clever critique of why surveys are annoying. It fundamentally alters the trajectory of how SaaS and enterprise software will be evaluated for the next decade.
It really does. If adopted, it marks the absolute death of the survey industrial complex.
This survey industrial complex, I absolutely love that phrasing. It is the end of customer experience being viewed by executives as a soft, discretionary cost center that just sends out automated emails with frowny faces. It is the birth of customer experience as a hard, quantitative, undeniable growth discipline. You are managing empirical behavioral outcomes, not fleeting human feelings.
And that shifts the entire power dynamic of the C-suite. The chief customer officer stops being the apologetic executive who has to explain away bad NPS scores at the end of the quarter. They become the most powerful person in the room because they are the one who brings auditable, cryptographic proof of ROI to the CFO.
Exactly. It is a complete inversion of corporate value.
Okay, as we wrap up this incredibly deep journey, we want to leave you with a final thought, a provocation, really, to test the reality of your own organization tomorrow morning. Ask yourself this. If your company's survival depended entirely on proving, with hard, ungameable digital evidence, that your last 10 customers actually achieved the functional business goals they paid you for, could you do it? And if the answer is no, what exactly are you actually measuring?
What are you actually measuring? Think about that the next time you look at a glowing green dashboard. Thank you so much for joining us on this Innovation Unpacked deep dive. We will see you next time.